Okay, hi, my name is Chloe. This is my first try at a YouTube video. I hope it goes okay. I really wanted a project. I wanted something to work on, and I put a lot of research into this video, so hopefully it pays off, meaning that I feel good about it and I put it out there and my friends like it. That's really all I can hope for. I am recently back in school, going to hopefully maybe transfer next fall. We'll see, at 23 years old. Still working through life, doing my thing, see what's gonna happen. I'm literally unemployed, so I'm looking for a job right now. Life is crazy. I don't know if I'm loving it, but I'm living it. And that's the most important thing. Anyway, I am like a sex nerd. I study a lot about sex history, sexual health and wellness, sex science. Like, I just do tons of research on my own all the time. I listen to podcasts and read books on the subject, so I thought that I would make this video because it's interesting to me. It's not necessarily interesting to everybody, but to me it is, so that's what matters. Let's get started. What is the history of the vibrator? You may have heard the story. European doctors in the late 1800s invented vibrators when regularly masturbating women by hand to induce orgasm as a cure for hysteria proved to be too hard on the wrists. Truly a riot of a tale. Too bad it's all made up. This is the hypothesis, yes, hypothesis, of Rachel Pearl Maines. Maines wrote a book in 1999 called The Technology of Orgasm, and I wanted to talk today about Rachel Maines and her misleading work that started a myth that became accepted as the truth, and the diligent scholars that meticulously scrutinized her work time and time again to dislodge this falsehood from the public's understanding of vibrator history. The Technology of Orgasm was birthed after Maines had already published articles on the invention of vibrators and presented her research at multiple seminars. I'm not sure if she labeled her content to be a hypothesis at these seminars or in these papers, but her book uses incredibly assertive language and at first blush seems to be an academic text full of research to back up her claims. However, this is misleading as much of her data doesn't add up, and in actuality, what is posing as a fact is a hypothesis. So Maines writes in the preface of her book that she developed a strong interest in the textile arts after graduating college in 1971. Disappointed by the lack of research done on the subject due to textile arts being a historically female activity and therefore largely ignored by historians, she began researching needlework and aims to create a more comprehensive written history than what already existed. While flipping through old magazines for her research, examining needlework trends throughout the years, Maines noticed herself getting distracted by the advertisements in the magazines. She saw ads from as early as 1906 for vibrators that almost but not quite resembled the vibes we use today for genital stimulation. These ads piqued her interest, and she began steadily collecting bits and pieces of vintage vibrator data until the subject inevitably became her main focus. On page 3 of The Technology of Orgasm, Maines writes, "When the vibrator emerged as an electromechanical medical instrument at the end of the 19th century, it evolved from previous massage technologies in response to demand from physicians for more rapid and efficient physical therapies, particularly for hysteria. Massage to orgasm of female patients was a staple of medical practices among some, but certainly not all, Western physicians from the time of Hippocrates until the 1920s, and mechanizing this task significantly increased the number of patients a doctor could treat in a working day." Okay, to sum up those two incredibly long sentences, Maines is asserting that at the end of the 19th century, when the vibrator was invented, it was created for clitoral massage to the point of orgasm, or hysterical paroxysm, but more on that later. She is saying that doctors commonly provided clitoral massage in their offices as a medical treatment for hysteria until the 1920s, and using a vibrator made women come faster than using hands. Which I cannot argue with her there, but this literally wasn't happening. The world was so enthralled by this idea that from Mains's book spawned the 2007 film Passion and Power, The Technology of Orgasm. It's like a documentary, which it's not because it never happened. Whatever. As well as a play 2 years later entitled In the Next Room, or the Vibrator play, that actually went to Broadway. All of this happened 10 whole years after the publishing of her book. Also in 2009, Rachel Maines appeared in a Big Think interview, being asked about her research and how the technology of orgasm drastically impacted her career.
You're going to laugh at me because what I thought was going to happen was that my colleagues would talk about it a lot, and that it would be reviewed in the scholarly journals, and that's all I expected. I thought maybe a few people might use it as a textbook, but actually it's used as a textbook in about 150 colleges and universities around the world. It's been translated now, I think it's now in 3 languages, and people just loved my hypothesis, and that's all it is really, is an hypothesis that women were treated with massage for this disease, hysteria, which has supposedly existed since the time of Hippocrates, 450 BC, and that the vibrator was invented to treat this disease. Well, people just thought this was such a cool idea that people believe it, that it's like a fact, and I'm like, it's a hypothesis, it's a hypothesis, but it doesn't matter. You know, if people like it so much, they don't want to hear any doubts about it. Eventually somebody will sit down and say, now maybe there's another way to interpret these data. But in the meantime, I'm really kind of enjoying all the attention that my book gets, as you can imagine.
So 2 years later, even after Maines had clearly stated in her interview that her book was based on a hypothesis, the film Hysteria came out, complete with a based on a true story text notice at the beginning. The film follows Joseph Mortimer Granville, a young doctor, learning to give clitoral massage to women and eventually inventing the vibrator to make the job easier and alleviate strain on his wrist. So, Chloe, what actually happened? Get to the point. Is it as juicy as the myth? No, it's not as juicy as the myth. I'm so sorry. What actually happened? Joseph Mortimer Granville created the first battery-operated vibrator in 1880. That much is true. It was not invented to genitally massage women or to cure hysteria. It was invented to percuss mainly non-sexual parts of the male body in doctors' offices. And Granville even writes specifically not to percuss women. The only remotely sexual use for these historic medical vibrators was the percussion of the male perineum to treat impotence. As we know, the perineum is an erogenous zone, especially for people with penises. Even so, I doubt men were having orgasms in doctors' offices either, simply because it probably would have been written down somewhere in somebody's medical journal or diary. Maines says that vibrators left doctors' offices in the 1920s to 30s when they started appearing in pornography. There is one pornographic video from the year 1930 called Massages that features 2 women in what look like nurses' uniforms having a consultation with a man who then strips down and lays on a table. The nurses massage his body with a vibrator and then put it aside when they all have sex. I have not been able to find any other pornography with a vibrator from this time period at all. And not a single video demonstrating vibratory clitoral stimulation. According to Maines, Roger Blake, of whom Maines critiques as admittedly not the most reliable of historians, described seeing a 1920s pornographic film entitled Widow's Delight about a finely dressed matron who rejects a kiss at the door from her suitor, then dashes into her bedroom and within seconds is stripped to her open girdle and stockings. She produces one of the first vibrator models on the market with the motor largely exposed and applies it liberally to her privates. That was a quote. That was all a quote. Okay, Roger, sounds super cool. Send the link because literally it's nowhere to be found on the internet, so. What about that term I mentioned earlier, hysterical paroxysm? What does it mean? Here is another notable but hard to digest quote from Rachel Maines' book.
Because the androcentric model of sexuality was thought necessary to the pronatal and patriarchal institution of marriage and had been defended and justified by leaders of the Western medical establishment in all centuries, at least since the time of Hippocrates, marriage did not always cure the disease represented by the ordinary and uncomfortably persistent functioning of women's sexuality outside of the dominant sexual paradigm. This relegated the task of relieving the symptoms of female arousal to medical treatment,
which defined female orgasm under clinical conditions as the crisis of an illness, hysterical paroxysm. That was long. Maines defines hysterical paroxysm as female orgasm in her text. Sex historian Kate Lister, which, by the way, this is like one of my favorite books of all time. I highly recommend it. I was rereading some of it for research for this video. Oh, so good. This is Kate Lister's book. She wrote it, so I highly recommend it. Anyway, sex historian Kate Lister points out that there are many historical medical journals describing the symptoms of hysterical paroxysm as something very different to the female orgasm we know and love, such as an uncontrollable attack of alternate sobbing and laughter. He said it is written as incontrollable, not uncontrollable, so I'm not, it's not on me. It was okay. An uncontrollable attack of alternate sobbing and laughter. That was William John Anderson, Hysterical and Nervous Affections of Women from 1864, page 26, in case anybody wants to find it. With the more severe cases lasting for at least an hour and often 5 or 6. That was John Henry Walsh and his Manual of Domestic Medicines and Surgery, 1858, page 150, if you want to find it. So, it's likely that whenever the term hysterical paroxysm came up in Maine's research and she got excited assuming that it was orgasm, it never meant orgasm. Not only did Rachel Maines publish a hypothesis with assertive language, but she included very little real evidence to back up her claims. And the citations she did include to prove her point are mostly irrelevant, false, or lacking in some way. Helen King was one of the very first to pick apart the technology of orgasm in her paper Galen and the Widow Towards a History of Therapeutic Masturbation in Ancient Gynecology. King points out that Rachel Maines, both in her text and in an interview later on, misattributed a quote from ancient Greek physician Aretaeus to Plato. This is not well researched or thought out. Throughout her book, Maines remarks on the androcentrism of the time, arguing that physicians did not see this genital massage as sexual and did not see hysterical paroxysm as orgasm, which, as we've established, it most likely wasn't. Mains's entire argument hinges on the belief that because of the androcentric view of sexuality at the time, physicians did not recognize external clitoral stimulation as sexually pleasurable. Lieberman, possibly the most prominent debunker of Mains's myth, notes that a lot of Mains's sources point to internal vaginal vibration and penetrative vibrators that were actually used in gynecological practices at the time. Maines seems to repeatedly contradict her own claims that doctors only got away with genital massage because the character of these services was camouflaged by the comforting belief that only penetration was sexually stimulating to women. Lieberman and Eric Schatzberg wrote a scholarly article on Rachel Mains's vibrator myth in 2018 entitled A Failure of Academic Quality Control, the Technology of Orgasm. This was the year after Lieberman had already written a whole book on the history of sex toys. She later expressed regret in not spending more time debunking Mains's myth in her book, since the rest of the world still believed it. Lieberman also wrote an article for the New York Times in 2020, clarifying her point that this myth we all believe is not true. I personally took a human sexuality course at community college in the year 2020, online of course, and I was taught this myth as a fact. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I've never heard of that before. That is really interesting. It's almost crazy. It's almost unfathomable. And you know what? It was, because it never happened. Anyway, to sum up, Vibrators were invented for medical uses unrelated to orgasm, hysterical paroxysm, or female sexuality at all. Over time, they became sexualized as many things do, and people realized that vibration was excellent for genital stimulation, but from the evidence we have, it took a while. Vibrators were marketed as home goods starting early in the 1900s and continued to be sold for years without being inherently sexual devices. When I told people what I was researching for my first YouTube video, I was met with an overarching response of, why does it matter? Like, what's the point of this? Sometimes I would say it doesn't matter. It's just interesting to me and it's fun to have a project. At other times, I try my best to sum up what Lieberman states so eloquently in her 2020 New York Times article. She says, "The myth isn't harmless. It's a fantasy that contributes to the ways we still misunderstand female sexuality, and that perpetuates harmful stereotypes that continue to resonate in our laws and attitudes. Attempts to control women's sexuality are based in part on the same beliefs that undergird the vibrator myth, that because women don't understand their own sexuality, they should not be the ones in control of it. It makes women seem ignorant, passive, and easily duped by manipulative men. In other words, it perpetuates the myth that women lack sexual agency." To close out this video, I wanted to share that I recently found this in a vintage shop. It is a 1958 vibrating pillow that promises results such as safe, effective aid in reducing and home figure control. It's about weight loss. It's a vibrating pillow that goes on your stomach, not on your genitals. This is from 58, and it's still not an explicitly sexual device. But look at this packaging, guys. This is so cool. I have no idea if this is centered because I don't know how to see, but I love it, and I wanted to possibly electrocute myself by plugging it in for this video. I haven't done it yet. I found this in Minnesota and I wore like 5 layers of clothing so that I could fit this in my backpack. Okay, this is wild. I'm so scared. Vibromaster pillow from Chicago. It like unzips. And it's like foam in here, and then just like this electric plate. Okay, I really do think that I could die, and I also think that this could not work at all. So I guess we'll see, guys. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I'm so nervous. Oh my god. I have to lower this. I have to lower this. Okay. I live in an apartment complex. I cannot afford to be... This is so loud. This is so crazy loud. I can't do it, but it works. It fucking works. And it's scary. So, goes right here for weight loss, apparently. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this crazy video. It's been a passion project for a while now. Before leaving you, I just wanted to mention, as I said before, Kate Lister's A Curious History of Sex is fabulous. And we also have Lieberman's Buzz, which I have not read, I'll be honest, but it's like the history of sex toys. So I highly recommend that you check both of these out. If you want more recommendations for books on this type of thing, I have them. I have lots of books. So let me know. Really appreciate you watching. Leave a comment and a like. It would help me out, supposedly. I'm new to this, but thanks for being here. Love you. Bye.